development, educating philosophy, and sociology as pillars before we learn technology developments in Australia and South Asia. And now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Ania. Dr. Ania, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, would you please?
Okay, so I trust wholeheartedly that everybody can see my PowerPoint. I'll try to make it run. If I can. All right. So thank you very much for the invitation. And as always, the older you get, the more you want to say. So I hope I can speak slow enough so the communication between Australia and Vietnam is clear. I will report a little bit on the findings of my PhD student, who I'm not sure whether she's here because she is submitting like within the next 7 days. So I think she's pretty anxious. And I will draw on those findings. Hopefully I'll have time to share with you some of my own experiences and beliefs. So I have listened to this lecture, and basically it's very interesting, and it has the economy aspect to it, so it makes it a little bit tough even for me. But what he says is really that what developing countries need most is knowledge. I think what all countries need most is knowledge. I think he was talking more in relation to the developing countries and to the 21st century's challenges. But knowledge matters. So where is innovation, I asked myself when I was writing this PowerPoint. And I would like you to think yourselves about it. Where is it? So we're here in the computer-assisted language learning conference, and maybe we are thinking applications. Not all of us are thinking that, and applications do matter, and how we design environments does matter, but what matters the most is, what do we know? Well, one thing that we do know, and I'm using here the Cambodian national curriculum. It doesn't matter which one I will use. All of you know that changes have swept through the education system all over the world, and we have experienced a shift. And I will talk more about this shift in another slide, but what we can see here is that the focus is the full citizen, right? So we're focusing now, people say skills, capabilities. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how the Cambodian curriculum words it, how the Australian curriculum words it. I think both documents should be read by stakeholders to learn more about what's involved. But what really matters is that we want to develop in our students the ability to be with people and to contribute to people. And as they contribute to people, they contribute to themselves. That's the key. Everything else is peripheral, right? Everything else is an aspect of it. And it cannot be done within itself, because within itself it makes no sense. It has no meaning. It has to be related to a broader goal. And that goal is the ability to be with people and contribute to people. So what's happening is that education all over the world wants you to be in the community. And community is the word that will be repeated in my presentation over and over again. And I'm flagging it to you because if all you need to remember or want to remember, or I advise you to remember from this presentation, is this word. And just to give you a little bit of an expectation, when we were doing the data analysis with my student, we really said it. You know, teacher is a community developer. It's not a teacher, it's a community developer within the framework of the new curricula. The teacher is a community developer, not just a tool enabling acquisition of content. That's the past. So, in a nutshell, this is a publication written by Eliot in 2004 and published in a book by Gary Thomas. And he says the recent changes in curricula are characterized by a shift from curriculum that saw learning as transmission of knowledge to one where learning is viewed as the transformation of knowledge. It's an extremely important statement. Rarely, I will show you later, I see this in the publications written either by the Cambodian scholars or by scholars who publish in Cambodia or on Cambodia. That's never mentioned. It's almost as if the curriculum was the paper and we just move on as we always did our own old ways. Okay, so I wanted to explain a little bit the concept of transformation. Whatever I say here, if I ask the 35 of you, or whatever is the number listening to me at the moment, you would come up with a different story, a different summary of my talk. And that's the beauty which makes us different, enables innovation, requires discussion, so that we can ponder longer and develop different implications and improve the ways we are. So basically what I'm saying is knowledge is always transformed by our experiences, right? So I've explained that briefly. So there's never a third place. It's the construct by Claire Cram she produced. I thought it was maybe working for her in that particular publication, but we have to be very careful what's working for her, for us, in a given moment in the paper, because people then read it and use it. And now we think that learning English puts you in the third place. What's the fourth place? It's the fourth language, and we're just in places, in bottles. So we are all traces of the conversations in which we have participated. The greater the range of our interactions, the more likely we are to reduce the distance, right? The more we interact with one another, the closer we become. We're not sitting in the third place. It's the connections that matters. To remove language learning from the community is to remove it from the context that gives the purpose for its learning, right? So we take the language from the community, we transform it, and then we push it back to the community, get feedback, get assessment of our own impact on the community, and then we interact again. It's the cycle. So while English language learning is mandated within the ASEAN member countries, making a textbook the focus of students' learning does not locate the learning of English in the community where the initial need for English emerged, right? So the need for English emerged in the community, but when we mandate textbook as the core source, we're instantly moving away from the narrative that drives modern curricula. Now, I am not criticizing the textbook. I'm just commenting on the resource. I want to show you some more things happening and why textbook in Cambodia is mandated as the main resource and maybe in other countries. It's tricky. So my student did the research. Basically, as everybody knows, Cambodia has gone through its turmoils, and we know that, and research is showing that internal turmoils are worse, that if you have a war with an external country partner, because external wars with external countries, what they do, with other countries, what they do, they tend to consolidate people. Whereas if you actually have an internal turmoil, what you end up is with a broken society. So what my student said, and she's been very much interested in this since she was doing even her master's, which is, are we talking to each other in our Cambodian ESL community? Or are we all broken? Are we, what we're doing, a reflection of the broken fabric? Or are we doing something about it? So that was the question. So the idea was to create somehow a methodology for research which will help us reflect whether we're connected in Cambodia, and I would like you to make connections to your own country on the basis of it, and maybe also do something similar, or whether we're all doing our own thing. So it's my student. So what we found out in the first stage of the research, I'm not sure whether that table is very clear for everyone, but what we found out was that, first of all, in relation to the themes that you can see on the left, and they start with global relevance, national relevance, these themes were first developed in the study by Dr. Wahid Nasruddin. He's actually here present and listening to us. And they were then worked on by other PhD students of mine, and we've got pretty nice metrics now. But what you can see, first of all, that a lot of nothings, right? So when we collected the data, we found out that people didn't talk about much. So that's the first thing. But when it comes to the dialogue aspect of it, right? So what we found out, that we had two groups, senior respondents and teachers. Senior respondents was everybody in the system who was not teacher. So the principals, the researchers, the teacher trainers, the ministry people. And what we found out, that senior respondents referred mainly to the Ministry of Education, to teacher trainers, to teachers. A little bit was here in the research area where they talked about research. But anywhere else, research, the research community was absent in the responses from the senior respondents. When we looked at teachers now, also in relation to research, teaching, and community, I'm looking at the first row. They did address the ELT research community in two aspects. First of all, they said in personal research, they said, well, we're not having any, nobody's helping us, nobody's here, it wouldn't be nice to have someone here. And in institutional support, they were saying things like, nobody is interested in us doing research, fundamentally. But nowhere else. It's almost like the first stage of data was quite intriguing. It looked like ELT research community was doing its own thing, and everybody else was focusing on planning the policies, planning the curricula, getting the things done, making sure that schools have resources of whatever kind is available in Cambodia, making sure that teachers sort of can do things, right? And we didn't find anyone making the ELT research community accountable or responsible for anything. We didn't even see the ELT research community, which was present here in this first stage, to actually asserting leadership. They were happy to cruise along. So basically, if I looked at the right column here, which is the areas of capacity that need developing, what we found was that while research expertise was there, and aspirations to be really good in that area were there, What we didn't have is the broader vision of the ELT research discipline, English language teaching, ELT stands for. ELT discipline in Cambodia needs a direction. We have a change in policies at both level, university and schools, and we need a research arm that serves this policy in order to inform it. This lack of interest in school-based research, there was lack of research in school-based research. It was very hard for us to also identify research in the literature. When the student was doing the literature review, we were finding very hard to find actually Cambodian scholars doing research in schools. So this lack of research in school-based research suggests that higher education institutions and also the ministry need to review their own policies regarding second language teaching research, the communities that this research is to support, and the impact assessment criteria. How is this helping us? How is this helping us? Are you just talking to yourselves? So in stage 2, we got some data, and I cannot present everything for many reasons, and one of them is lack of time. But I would like to share with you some statements that we found. So ELT academics commented on the lack of direction. So some of them did actually note this. So lack of direction in the English language teaching discipline, with researchers following their own interests, independently of what the national education needs may be in relation to English. And one academic stated, academics teaching English do not see their work as being in education, but purely in language. Purely in language is sociolinguistics. It cannot be English language teaching. So in any event, it is understood that this also is the view of the ministry. Well, it is understood. Is it stated somewhere? Anyway, if there is no interference, if there is no policy directive, it can be understood this way. But ELT is a field of its own, for itself, for the greater good of itself. There were varied views on research incentives, so people were commenting, well, is it worth to do research? But it was acknowledged that there are grants, international grants, funded by World Bank, but only if you did school-based teaching. Right? So academics who teach English cannot find grants that would support their interest. Well, that's very interesting. It's a food for thought. It's not like in Australia, you can research whatever is on your mind. In fact, the concept of research interest to people who are not integrated in research discipline enough, they think it really is what pops into your head, what tickles your imagination. Research interest doesn't mean that. It means the area of specialization that you have decided to pursue to learn more on the issue of national relevance. It doesn't mean you have to say transformative learning is the good thing, but you need to inform it. So school principals were also very clear about research. Teachers are not expected by the ministry to do research. We have no research projects. Teachers and schools are not connected to any university. Problems are solved in the house, right? By us ourselves. At the same time, we found, I will not spend much time reading this, but basically all stakeholders said we're isolated. There are no connections. They're not working within the community. There are no connections. People are on their own, and they're not working also with other partners. And while I sympathize with statements like people from the Asian countries are not interested in working with us, but it's like saying all my miseries are your fault, right? You got to do something about it. And all stakeholders need to do something about it, not just ELT research community. So what happens? We have those textbooks in schools. So policymakers provide schools with textbooks which effectively become the working curriculum of schools. I have mentioned that. So curriculums is one thing, reality on the ground is another. An investment in traditional learning resources is being made, and as a result, traditional models of language teaching follow. Pedagogy that advocates transformative learning requires investment that is informed. No Ministry of Education is gonna flip their fingers and say, from today, with all transformation, transformative learning, right? Schools get no resources, they get computers. What a great idea. We just put computers everywhere. Teachers can't teach. Teachers don't know what to do with the computers. Teachers don't know what's English. Teachers don't know anything. And they got the computer. Better thing, we have computers and textbooks. How do you think they will be used? Clearly, if all you have is the culture of transmission, you will be using technology for transmission, you'll be using textbook for transmission. So basically what I am saying here, without research, tension will be always present between what's needed and what is done. Without research, we have no understanding of transformation, of transformational learning, of transformational education. That needs to be researched. That needs to be told to the ministry. And then the ministry may change its investments. But it can't do it without research. So we can write multiple papers on how education is bad in Cambodia. The question is, what have you done yourself to make it better? Right? It's a serious question. So, no research basically in schools. The literature, we looked at the literature, not only of the literature by the Cambodian scholars, but also literature of overseas scholars writing on Cambodia. And what we found, that great ideas are there, but they are not theorized. Theorizing is extremely important, because if you don't theorize, you're the only one who understands your concepts, your methods, your everything. So you have no impact on anything. You can just improve yourself, and you won't, because if you don't have systematicity, you're just running around publishing everywhere. Right, so theorizing makes your publications and your thoughts shared. We also found an uncritical acceptance of concepts of ELT discipline. ELT is a large discipline, and it has a lot of things in it. Right, we need to, if you have been exposed to those concepts, that's great. But there is research outside ELT that enables you to reflect a little bit on those concepts. That work needs to be done. What we also found, that in the university-based articles, there was no references to the new curriculum, to the new graduate attributes or graduate attributes framework, which is transformative learning, right? None of that was mentioned. We were just doing writing. Just leave us alone. We're just checking whether if we correct each other's errors, that will help. Will help what? So no theorizing of the concept of the curriculum, right? Concepts of the curriculum. What does it mean? To cooperate, to collaborate, to do inquiry-based processes. I mean, that's not straightforward. So I kind of was a little bit critical here. I wanted to just mention these two things. Comprehension is not two people understanding each other. There's this famous neuroscientist, Ramachandran, who says you have to explain your concept with a process, not with a synonym. A mother is a mum. The mother is, the thing that the mother. My mother is the mother. It's tautology. So what process is involved is in comprehension. What the process is involved is sharing the background conversations. sharing the background conversation. So as a teacher, you need to now think, how the heck do I facilitate that? And I don't have the time to talk about it, but that's a good question. How the heck do I facilitate sharing the background conversation? Not making sure students understand the vocabulary. You know what happens when you know the vocabulary of English? You come to Australia and you actually speak Cambodian, or you speak Chinese, or you speak Vietnamese, because there is no one-to-one match with vocabulary. Well, feedback is not commenting. Honestly, I think we're done with that. There's enough data in neuroscience helping us to think about it. So it is what the student perceives as important. Yeah, how do you tap into that? Like, how do you know what the student perceives as important? What frameworks do you have to actually help you think about it, right? So these are areas of research. It takes time. It took 14 billion of years to make you, and me. It takes time. We would like to have everything fixed instantly. It takes a little bit of plowing through research. It takes a little bit of watching YouTube and checking what these neuroscientists are talking about. It takes a bit of learning. So in my practical aspect of my presentation, because I know that I have spoken about a lot of things, and people would like to see the so what. So the so what is that we need to do some work, right? And I flagged some areas of where work belongs and where work needs to be done. But this is a very old project. When the internet wasn't as it is today, Dr. Maliwan Bura Napatana, when I met her, was not a doctor. And she met me in the year 2000 when the internet, we were writing it by hand, HTML files, right? I still remember writing them. So what she did with no video in the way it is done now, with no Facebook, with no social networks of the kind we have here, she created this project for her students. And the website of course is gone because there are no codes on the internet that would enable the old codes to still be this visible. But anyway, the project was to create a tiny network. The project took place in Konkan University with first-year students. And what the students did, they went to the community, collected stories, brought them to the classroom, discussed them with one another, did some readings on the stories when needed. Experts from the community were invited, from the university community as well, made comments and so on. It took a lot of work, but an informed citizen was the outcome of it. I don't have the time to read through it. I'm just putting this slide here in the video for the record. Basically, it was a success in many different ways. I wanted to say something here that is a little bit maybe new for most of us, I would assume, but maybe not for all people either in not for all people, but for many. Students are not learning a language, but literacy skills, right? Because literacy means the skills you need in order to be in the community. Learning of a language means nothing. So that's why I'm saying research needs to be then research needs to unpack the things that we thought we've understood for years. Oh, we just teach language, we just teach a language, we just teach languages. No, we're in the business of developing in the students the capacity to function in the community increasingly better. And for that, they need literacy skills in their own language or in English. And obviously, I'm not the person who is going to say that, well, teach English through Vietnamese only, so teach them Vietnamese as a result. No. But what happens is if you do not have those literacy skills in your first language, you're not likely to have them in the second language. So the more sophisticated your teacher is in English, the bigger the distance is between the demands of the English classroom and your own capabilities. So what we need to do is to actually leverage on both the L1 and L2. Teaching by supporting reflection, right? Reflection, because what transformation is reflection. Only reflection promotes interaction. Why did you do that? Why do they do that? Why couldn't we do it differently? Why didn't they make it shorter? Why do they have so many words, right? All of that. These are areas of research. How do you promote reflective learning? How do you increase interaction? It's not simple. Interaction is not two people talking. Most of the talk happens in your head, right? So it's very important. So I wanted to say also something, because I'm working a lot with Indonesian colleagues, and I wanted to say is that mandating a single process of text analysis, I don't care whether it's Ania Lian's, I have my own, or whether it's someone else's, mandating a single process of text analysis is short-sighted in the long run. Every methodology can, every scholar can sell to you whatever they are in the business of. They will sell it to, oh, you know, we teach how to write letters. That's what you say. It's not necessarily what's happening. So, for example, systemic functional linguistics is mandated currently in Indonesia as the method for teaching literacy. It is extremely hurtful, because not only the method doesn't teach through reflection, and reflection is what generates transformation. The method teaches by modeling, pointing the finger, literally pointing the things you need to see. And mandating eliminates innovation, because then everybody in the ELT community is thinking, oh my God, I've got to memorize AsiaCALL. I can't remember, I don't understand it. There are people like me, and there are people like other people I know. They don't get the model. It's very simple, but we don't get it. That's great. Invent your own. But if you are not allowed to think critically, you must reproduce. You will never develop the discipline, let alone the country, of innovation and thought. I don't know whether this will work, but this is a product of one of my students. I just want to show you some things, okay? Just little examples. I'm gonna take another 4 minutes just to do all of that. So she wanted just show you some how little innovations you can do that reflect, that support reflective learning, not teaching. So basically, if we have here, so basically the person wants to flag to students the structure of scientific report. So if you have a SFL model, the teacher comes up with the scientific reports and shows to you, you know, what matters. Reflective thinking is different. Look what she's doing. I hope it works. So first of all, what did she do? She had these two big structures, right? So daily news and the abstract template of the newspaper, which is the daily news is just the big title, and it has a small subtitle and whatever. So let's have a look what she did. So this is a scientific report. It has a title, it has a subtitle, it has headings, it has short paragraph, it has table. Now compare it with a newspaper. It has a title, just like the scientific report, but it doesn't have a subtitle, it doesn't have headings, it doesn't have short paragraphs, it has long ones, it doesn't have a table making people, you know, have a heart attack going through the table. It has a photograph to connect with people, to make things familiar. There's a caption. Isn't it lovely? So that's one sort of thing that, one of a strategy that I actually was very excited to see in my own students. For teach, obviously it's not the whole assignment that she created, but I think that little trick may actually inspire some ideas in you. So I teach literacy, English literacy in my university. I teach also how to teach languages, but the English literacy is one of my core subjects because I am in Australia, so I've got hundreds of students always every year. So here to promote reflective thinking in a country which may have access to computers as opposed to textbooks, but it doesn't have teachers with excellent knowledge of English. So let's look first at one method and then sort it out the other way around. So I just found I work sometimes. So let's say the structure of the genre of the fable. So we've got a fable about the grasshopper and an ant, right? I try to use Google Translate to translate the first paragraph into Vietnamese and Cambodian. I'm not sure. With some languages, the translation works perfectly. I think that with the Vietnamese, it will work better than with the Cambodian. With the Indonesian, it just works totally perfect. There are reasons for it. If you know how Google Translate actually learns, then you will know why it works well. Okay, so what can you do? Well, was it comprehensible, the text? Can you edit it now in L1 to make it better? So you still work on the translation, which is the Vietnamese language or the Cambodian language. The English is there. It got translated, but we can't sort of make sense out of it. Can we actually make it better? How would you do it? How would you do this? By eliciting reflection, right? What devices also in technology? How can you invite? Okay, can you invite the teacher of Vietnamese literature to help you with it? Can you invite someone from the community to help you with it? Some people may have skills, but basically the idea is, how do we edit it? The next question is, once we have this sort of edited text, and we've done a lot of reflection, we've understood a little bit of the structure of the fable and maybe the role of the fable and what the fable is, and why do we have animals or insects? Why don't we have Mary and John? Instead, we have grasshopper and an ant. All of that, we know that we reflected on all of this. You can't cover everything. The next fable will bring you questions. The idea is now to think to yourself, okay, what resources, what ICT tools can I use? What tools can you use for students to, sorry, I need to change this because I can't read it. There's this thing in my, can I move it? Oh, I can move it, okay. So what tools can you use for students to now to hear the text, right? So what needs to be done next? So basically, what ICT tools can you use to help now students to actually now they have the comprehension in Vietnamese, now to sort of have a comprehension of the text in English? What ICT tools can you use? What tools can you use to hear the text? How can you help now students to retell the story? What ICT tools can you use? I will give you some very simple examples, but these are questions for research, for your imagination, and also maybe for your IT teams to help you develop. Now, once students have actually worked with ICT tools to actually make sense of the English text, and I'm talking about beginner students, I'm not talking about, advanced university students, just anyone can work with that. Can you apply the same process to other fables? Can your students now create their own fables, publish it on the website, publish books for other children, for other people to enjoy, right? So now they no longer learn all of this for themselves, but in order to share, to give it to others, so that children in hospitals can access it, so that they can be displayed somewhere, so that people can actually, it can actually be given to the community for more transformations to happen. I think I did that. What what if you were to create your own text first? So you create your own text. So you go to the community, you talk to the farmers there, which is what happened in Thailand. And the farmers were in a big sort of a double bind because they didn't have money to pay to the banks, and people were coming to them and offering them very little money for the field and all of that. So you go, you collect a story, and it's a story in your first language, right? So you created this. How do you turn it into a news story for your website? Say Thai News Network or Vietnamese or Ho Chi Minh University Network or whatever. So basically you follow the same process. First you create your your text in L1. Do not assume that you actually know how to write it. You have to go through the same literacy process as you did before. You need to actually compare the text you created with other texts that are actually written by professionals. Analyze, compare, contrast, and so on. So I leave this here, and I wanted, before I end, so it's basically the same process. What I wanted you to see, I obviously have my own systems for analyzing and working with text in a reflective ways, and I improved them. What I thought was final 2 years ago, a year ago, I got a new student from Indonesia, and he asked me a question I couldn't answer. As a result, I've improved my own model. So do not think that your first invention is the last invention, or that it is not perfect, therefore no good. Okay, so, but simple things, right? I took a text from a Cambodian textbook for high schools. And what I did was to remove the things from the text, I crossed them out, that don't have to be there. I mean, it's perfectly okay to say light is something that is hard to describe. Why do they have to have all of this? This is what my undergraduate students call fluff. Now they apologize profusely, but I like it, right? So you just do that and think to yourself, why did they put this sentence, this bit here, that here, that here, that here? You could read this text by just focusing on the things that really matter, right? And what really matters is to say something about light, and that's it. Why do they have this fluff? I am not going to give you my answer, but with the only reason why I have an answer is because I ask the same question of another text being advised to schools in Australia. And we've done with my undergraduate students, we did this trick, and then we looked at it and we came up with our own thoughts. So it's for you to decide, for you to think about it. And whatever solution or answer you will have, then you will put it in and apply in the next text, and then it will help you to refine your reflections. And that's what it is about. It's for you to understand, not for me to tell you, and for you to remember. Then I looked at another text. Now this one I took from the internet, which also was science text. But this was produced actually to compete for readership, right? So people, when they write blogs, they want other people to actually read it. And it didn't have any fluff. And I'm not saying science news text doesn't have fluff. Check a lot of them and you will see that some science news texts produced by experts do have fluff. Well, this one didn't. Something to think about. But it was very interesting to read. It was fact after fact after fact. And the story was really progressing. I obviously didn't put the whole thing here, but it was really drawing you in. So even just a trick like crossing out the bits that don't matter and reflecting on why the heck they're there, it's reflective learning. Producing conclusions. One of the conclusions we produced with my students was the saying that the moral always has a structure. It's always best to do something. So while in the story, in the fable itself, the moral can be more poetic, phrased differently, but underneath, the raw structure is it's always best to do. So now once you have deduced some sort of principles from your reflection, you can then see how they apply in other texts and change maybe those, right? So these are the sort of things that the tools I used. Google Translate, the Oddcast, the TalkTyper. TalkTyper will play with it, please, guys. And basically here you talk to it and it spits out words. And when it does it, you can see that words are separated. You can see the breaks, where the breaks are. Then you can put just the word R in the outcast, which is the text-to-speech thing, and it will read it to you. You can remove E from R, and then you will see how the avatar will read it. And then you can see the relationship between how it's written and how it's spoken. As soon as you remove letters, the avatar reads the word differently. Extremely awareness raising. So first we were doing some explorative, reflective things, but then what I'm suggesting also to do sort of explorative things, but also then maybe some more focused things and more drills. Nothing wrong with drills, provided that you actually put them as a method for reinforcing the key issues that emerge, not the content, right? So this is something, word maker. I put the word light because there was a text on light and it came up with lots of words with light. So there are games everywhere. So I want to talk about, because this you can read for yourselves, this sort of community engaging activities, which is what I'm supporting, because they actually have language in the community and invite students to engage with the community and produce something that is relevant for them and whose effect they can actually observe as they interact with the community and do things for the community. Research, how can you do that? How can you facilitate this interactive learning? I gave you some sort of directions here. How can you better assist students in building skills for talking to locals? Yeah, that has emerged in Maliwan Burapana's thesis, right? 19-year-olds found it very difficult to go to the village and talk to a 60-year-old farmer. So something to think about. Can you invite people to actually help you? Can you film them? Then create your own resources. So there's plenty to do, plenty to have done. Illustrate to your ministry as a solid work, and then argue for policy change. Every study has recommendations. Every study is really, if I only was the prime minister, or if only I was the minister of education, I'd know what to do. On the basis of what? Where research is missing, and when the country has no intellectual arm in its key policy, educational policy, how do you make decisions and not lose your job? Clearly, textbook becomes the only solution, safe solution. It worked in the 50s, it worked 200 years ago, and we have nothing new because nobody helps us. Because each of us is doing their own thing. Policymakers are doing their own thing. Language teachers are doing their own thing, although because they, at the coal face of the problem, they want to interact. But English language teachers are doing their own thing. A lot of them studied in Australia. And in Australia, they studied with the professor who was doing his or her own thing. Right? So we're all over the place, pulled apart by many forces. We need someone to integrate all of this, give a policy direction, and actually ask to focus in a reflexive way on what we're doing and why. Otherwise, we're stagnated and we will always have the same issues. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.